you might be missing out on some stats. Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends. We are on the free-to-play. We're actually going to be over on the main in a little bit, but I've got a bit of a surprise for you in this video as well on the free-to-play. But we're going to be talking about stats and building champions, and specifically a couple of tricks on how to make sure that your builds are absolutely amazing. Some of the stuff you probably already know, some of the stuff you might not, but you may not realize the impact in some cases of how important some of these things are to getting endgame stats on endgame champions. So we're going to do a breakdown. I've got two different champions broken down into pieces where I actually dove into some of the parts that I want to talk about, but we'll talk about the entire build overall and talk about, you know, what you can do to boost your stats to much more incredible levels. And honestly, that's one of the best ways to progress in Raid Shadow Legends, is to get your stats better. And sometimes it doesn't even involve re-gearing your champion. But first of all, why we're on this account right here? Well, we're on this account right here because I have not done my daily shard pulls yet. I have 6 voids. I'm not pulling all 6 in this session. I'm only pulling 3 for the daily, and if I miss on a legendary, I'm pulling 3 for the next daily. So this account, as many of you may know, missed on a void legendary, and I am at least 199 shards into Void Mercy, which means that I'm going to start getting an extra, well, it's, where is it? Right here. Here we go. Mercy system. We're going to get an extra 5% chance to hit a legendary every time we pull. And we have a progressive rate up on a good champion. This particular account, honestly, if we go here and look at these guys here, not the Queen of Hearts here, if we just look at the choices here, Siphi, great champion, would probably do some good stuff on this account. Diamond Copper Coin, not really a champion I want to be pulling for. But Queen of Hearts is not only one I don't have on my main, but I don't have a 100% everybody on the team joins in ally attacker, and Queen of Hearts is very disruptive in arena as well. And that would help me progress in arena just a little bit further, because right now I'm very much stuck by the limit of the speed of my champions as far as progressing in arena. I'd like to do a little bit better. I'd like to be able to maybe even progress past, you know, I'm at silver 2 or silver 3 at the moment. If I can get myself to gold 1 for even a brief moment, I will have that Ramonto mission done, and I can be happy about that. So Queen of Hearts should be amazing for this account. The ally attack will be helpful in several PvE parts of the game as well. It will be helpful for a lot of other parts of the game, such as, of course, the Centranos Curse City stuff as well. She's a great champion. So we're going to pull 3 shards for her. Let me go grab a Pepsi and we'll be right back. All right. So we got our Pepsi, not a sponsor, but Pepsi, you could be. Let's bring home a legendary champion. There we go. Ooh, Emic. That is great. That is absolutely amazing. It took me a minute to figure out which one of the Sylvan Watchers this guy was. Emic is going to be absolutely amazing, and I can stop pulling voids right now because we got a great legendary here. What does he do? Well, he's got a shield growth here, but it's only, it says on this champion, also increase the value of any shield buffs on an ally whose lowest HP, with the lowest HP by 25%, but cannot decrease to over 10,000. So I technically could use him for a really budget tightest team, but he's not adding a ton of damage, so that's fine. But he does have this 4-turn, 3-turn cooldown when booked, places a shield buff on all allies for 30% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns, decreases the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion's by 1 turn. That is a very big and chunky shield. So that is very good, but the cooldown is actually really kind of cool. So you can use him in some of the Iron Twin shenanigans, and he does a great job with that. In fact, he'll probably end up in my Iron Twins team, because as long as I can make sure that he is constantly healing, he can basically make the team somewhat immortal, and I could technically tune it to be somewhat immortal. But honestly, he may end up in my clan boss team too, because extra shield is great, but here's why he might end up in my clan boss team. Places an unkillable buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. Also places a taunt buff and a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns. Value of that shield is 30% of this champion's max HP. So he only needs, what, 2 books, 3 books there. Doesn't really need those books at all. Great great, unkillable. This allows for a lot of shenanigans in clan boss. I might be able to make myself a 1-key clan boss team with an Emic as well. And in fact, I believe there are some Emic clan boss teams that also work for some of the tunings, specifically for the Iron Twins as well. So that's really fun. That is an account changer. It is not a Queen of Hearts, but honestly, it is a great champion to get on this account. Finally, his passive, when attacked while under a shield buff, has a 50% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill the attacker by 2 turns. Not going to help on Iron Twins or Clan Boss, but it is kind of nice if I want to use them in Arena for some strange reason. Whenever an ally's HP drops below 20%, increases the damage dealt by that ally by 20%. So that can actually help with Iron Twins as well in some cases. And he does get 2 books in here. I don't really need these books either. So if we can get away with it, he could be 5 books and done, which would make him a very good budget legendary as well. And then finally, we've got this HP aura in all battles of 30%. It's a good aura. It's certainly not the best aura, but it's a good aura. It's a very usable aura. He is going to be helpful. He is probably going to end up in my Faction Wars team. He is going to end up probably my Iron Twins team. He might end up in my Clan Boss team. He will be helpful for content in Centranos, I'm very sure. And, I got to figure out how to book him and whether or not I'm booking him versus Donatello. Hey, leave me a comment down below if you think I should book Emic before I finish booking Donatello. Or maybe I'll try to book the 2 of them together. Donatello is still doing some great work for me, and he's only partially booked as well. So that is awesome. That means I don't need to pull any more shards here, so I can actually just yeet 10 of these guys and get my dailies done. Ooh, I got a rare too. That's nice. And hey, let's get to the actual part of the video that we were going to talk about. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can get extra stats in this game. And I think it's important because a lot of people don't use all these to their advantage, and then they wonder why they can't get some of the builds that I might showcase on some of these champions when I'm doing builds as well. Now, there is no doubt that some of this is just plain old getting good gear and having a 4-year-old account or 5-year-old account, as it were. I'm actually not even 100% sure at this point in time. The years kind of blur together at this point. But I have been farming gear for ages, so I've got good gear. But it's not just good gear that's giving me all of these extra stats. There's a couple of things that are kind of important that are worth mentioning. First of all, the relics give you some extra stats. This is not necessarily a ton of stats, but it is extra stats. Don't sleep on relics giving you extra good stats. That can be very, very important. And sometimes it's just important what the stat is. In some cases, you're looking for crit damage, for example. And so a ton of extra crit damage might be very impactful on a nuker. Whereas, HP and defense, not bad. If this had speed on it, this would be great. But this is going to help her because the relic does other things as well. So the relics can be very helpful, even if you're not getting all the stats you want. But they can just be really good for stat sticks if you can build some of these relics up. So don't be afraid to build a couple of relics up just for the stats. And of course, blessings. And I think most people don't underestimate the power of blessings, but we're talking a ton of HP, a ton of attack, a ton of defense, a ton of crit damage, a ton of resistance and accuracy, and 15 speed is not to be slept on. 15 speed for an Ostrid, for example, who starts off with a 115 speed, is more than 10% extra speed on the fastest champion in the game. Now, Ostrid's not the only one that has this speed, but Ostrid is tied for the fastest champion with everyone else that a 115 speed is. And if you think about that, you're talking about a 12 to 15% boost. Oh, yeah, we'll say 12% about right. 12% to 13% boost in speed. That is huge. That is absolutely massive. And that stat number is flat. So if you have a slower champion, those plus 15 can be even more impactful on a slow champion. So do not underestimate a 6-star blessing on a legendary. On a epic, I believe it's still plus 10. And on a rare, I think it's like plus 6 or plus 8. Still very, very good and worth talking about. But one of the things that's very important is we look at the total stats right here. And as we can see here, I've got total stats here. I've got 72k HP, 360 speed, 565 accuracy right here. And what we are going to do is I have broken this down because one of the things I want to talk about that I think a lot of people are missing is they're missing the extra stats here from glyphing artifacts up and from ascending the artifacts as well. So as you can see here, I've got 3 speed extra here, 3 speed extra speed here, 3 speed extra speed here. That adds up. And to be fair, I could use bigger glyphs and make this much larger. This goes up to +8 with the normal glyphs and goes even higher with the new glyphs that are dropping in hard faction wars. So I could push these much higher than just 3. But you know what? 3 is actually a good number because most people, if you're saving your 5 and 6 stars at the moment because you're still progressing in the Ramantu missions, you're going to want to save those 5 and 6 stars until you can try to use those to max out some of those quests. And then after that, use whatever you need to use to get the stats you're looking for. And sometimes you look at a piece and say, this piece is not worth a 6-star glyph, but it might be worth a 4-star glyph because this is still extra speed. So keep in mind, all these extra stats, bonus stats, make a huge amount of extra bonus, and they are built into this artifact spot right here. Same with the Ascension. As you can see here, that's 1,200 extra HP there, another 1,280 defense here, 20% HP, and that's 20% off of the base HP. Crit rate extra here. In this case, I don't need that extra crit rate. This would be better as either crit damage or some other stat, but you know, that's what I've got on her, so that's fine. And to be fair, I don't think it's worth the extra or re-rolling this at the moment, because honestly, these things could end up on somebody else where I actually might appreciate that extra 10% crit rate. So I don't think it's a horrible stat to have on these particular pieces right here. And then of course, yeah, we've got extra defense here, extra crit damage here, extra accuracy here. That's absolutely huge. So let's pull up my little spreadsheet right here and take a look and see what we got here. So if you're looking here, this is the gear things total. In fact, we'll pull this up here. Maybe you can't see that. You probably can't because I'm blocking it now. That's fine. But as you can see here, from glyphs, I got myself an extra 3,600 HP and an extra 6,000, 700-ish HP from Ascensions. I got an extra 171 attack, which, not too horrible. And again, I'm not building her for a lot of attack, but she can do some decent damage, so you might as well glyph it up. Defense, we're getting another 256 and then another 160. So you can see here, we're getting 400-ish extra defense on top of what we would have only gotten if we just used the plain old gear of 1,400 or basically 1,500. So we're getting an extra, 500, so an extra 25% more defense. In this particular case here, we're getting almost like an extra 50% extra HP with the glyphs and ascensions. That's huge. For speed, we got an extra 32 speed, which is huge. And compared to the fact that we only got an extra 182 speed from the gear, and that's including bonuses to speed from having an 8-piece pinpoint set, as well as I guess the feral 1 piece is not going to do much of anything, so that's not that big of a deal. And then of course we've got some crit rate, crit damage here. We've got a little bit of extra 10% crit rate, 12% crit damage. Not huge on this particular character, but since she's already got some damage and she's got the crit rate as well, doesn't hurt. And again, this is where this extra 20% crit damage would have been a better roll than the 10% crit rate on this specific build. And then here, in the accuracy too, got 60 extra points of accuracy. That again is more than 25% extra accuracy on the champion that we're getting from the gear itself. If we look over here, here is the total we have right here on the far right side. You got 10k HP and then a total without. Okay, so apparently there was a few errors in the total on the spreadsheet. They were not affecting any of the other totals right there because most of the rest of the stuff is calculated off the base. And in fact, if you want to see the math here, this is the math. I went through and added all the percentage levels and then added the extra non-flat levels here for the glyphs, as well as the ascensions here as well. And that gave me the total here of her 7,226 HP. We're getting 10k of it. So we're getting, that's about a sixth of it, maybe a little bit less than a sixth of it from glyphs and ascensions. That's kind of huge. Getting a ton of it off of, not a ton of extra attack, but we're getting a little extra attack here because we can. Again, getting a ton of extra defense here. We're talking almost 10% of the defense he has gotten from glyphs and ascensions. 32% speed, we're talking close to 10% extra speed just from glyphs and ascensions. And again, we could have glyphed this a lot better here. We're talking a bunch of +3s and a bunch of +4s. Again, we don't need the bunch there. 12 extra crit damage. If I were to flip this around a little bit and make this an extra 32% crit damage, however, that would be a ton of extra crit damage for her here. And then, you know, an extra 60 accuracy, that's more than 10% extra accuracy from glyphs. And meanwhile, you can see here, compared to a blessing, glyphs are doing heavy lifting in a couple of important areas, particularly for her HP, particularly for her accuracy, particularly for her the defense as well. But, you know, the blessing certainly gives you a little more overall good stats, but still very, very helpful. You know, mastery's at a little bit here as well. The arena is certainly doing some work here, and the Great Hall is doing some work here as well. This is a maxed out Great Hall. So as you can see, I'm getting a 20% bonus here. I think I just copied the numbers here, but I'm getting a 20% bonus here. I'm getting a 20% bonus here, 20% bonus here, 25 crit damage, 80 and 80. And then from arena, I am in gold 5, where I'm getting a 22% bonus here. So these arena stats, not to be slept on either. That is a good chunk of extra stats. And yeah, some of them are just HP and defense, which is survivability, but survivability is huge in most areas of the game. And even in arena, it helps if your nukers can take a hit or two occasionally, because you don't want somebody like a Duchess to be able to nuke down your Georgid, for example. Speaking of which, I figured I'd also show you on a nuker. And in this particular case, Georgid is very much focused and built as best as I possibly could with all of the ascensions. So we've got attack every place where I could get a flat attack ascension. We have attack percent anywhere I could get a percent ascension. And to be fair, if this had been speed instead of attack, I would have been perfectly fine with that, because getting 12 extra speed was fine, but the 20% extra attack was very good for Georgid as well. You could even argue that I don't actually need this much attack on him, but we'll get to those totals a little bit later. Again, crit damage here, that's always great. Again, attack here, crit damage here, attack here. My Georgid is pretty cracked. He definitely has some problems in arena, because Georgid is certainly not as meta as he used to be, because he is really, really squishy. But if we take a look here for all the total stats we've got right here, I've got 40k HP still with a 5-star blessing. You see that blessing's doing a lot of heavy lifting here. The Faction Guardians helping here as well, Masteries, Classic Arena helping a little bit as well, affinity bonuses. To be fair, I did not count the Faction Guardians for Ostrid, but again, you know, Faction Guardians is a little bit harder for you to control compared to Classic Arena, your affinity bonuses for the Great Hall, as well as these ascension bonuses, and even the blessings. You can control the blessings a little bit more by pulling for specific champions, making sure you're doing your Iron Twins, and this is why blessings are so powerful. We haven't even talked about the bonuses that these blessings do as well, and I mentioned relics could be very good as well. For Georgid, this relic is not a great stat relic, but specifically with him, I've got the Gore Crescent, but he does an extra 20% damage after killing an enemy, and since he can kill an enemy with his A3 really easily, the extra 20% on the next attack means that he has an AoE that's doing 20% extra damage flat on top of everything else, making him a beast in arena. Because he gets the extra turn, he gets a chance to do it again too. So let's pull up the spreadsheet and break down how important the ascensions were to these total stats. So again, looking at this here, from glyphs, we got a little extra HP, not a ton, but some extra HP here. But from glyphs and ascensions for attack, that's a lot of extra attack. In fact, that is an extra 50% attack over what we were getting just from the gear. That is huge. That is beyond amazing. It's just, you know, we're getting an extra 1,000. We're basically getting almost a full 100% of his base attack. Again, in fact, we got more than that from the glyph and the ascension by themselves. That is huge for a nuker, and that's why these ascensions and these glyphs super, super valuable. Now, I understand that the glyphs are only going to be reliable enough depending on some of the substats that you have. So if you don't have all the extra attack substats, you're going to struggle to get some of these extra attacks there. But the Ascensions will still always be available for you, and you can still do an amazing amount of work just glyphing up whatever you can and getting good ascensions on your champions. 24 extra speed is huge. In fact, if we look at that over here, that's an extra 10% speed just from glyphs. And it makes a huge difference on a champion like this, where you're not going to be using the fastest gear on them. So simply having a speed on any of your gear allows you to glyph it up, which allows you to make it that much faster. And that is why having speed on your gear in the end game is super, super important. And then finally here, we have the 32% extra crit damage here. That is almost 10% extra crit damage versus what else we have. The Blessings doing a lot of heavy lifting here as well. Relics certainly helps a little bit as well. And there's other relics that could give you more crit damage or might make a little more sense for a Georgid. You know, the Cat's Gaze could be very interesting. It gives him a ton of crit damage. The Malefic Talon gives him a ton of crit damage. Could be a good one for him as well. It'll add damage to pretty much everything that he does, but he won't get the extra flat 20% for the Gore Crescent that he gets right now. So it's kind of hit or miss which one would actually be better for you. Although you do get an extra 10 or 20% from the Talon. So maybe the Talon might actually be a better one. But, you know, at the time, I didn't have a lot of extra Talons and I had some Gore Crescents. So for Georgid, it allowed me to make a good situation out of a okay-ish relic. But here, we're talking a ton of extra attack. We are talking almost 20% of his attack is based off of glyphs and ascensions. That's huge. So just, you know, hopefully I've beaten this into your heads, guys, you know, and I understand some of you guys know this, but I don't think you realize how impactful glyphing everything out on a champion can be for getting them to a maximum speed, for getting them to a maximum damage, for getting them maximum survivability. But again, don't throw out these Great Hall bonuses as well. These Great Hall bonuses, they're doing a lot of heavy lifting with him having 40k HP. If you look at right here, there's an extra 600 attack. That's, you know, a third of what we're getting from these glyphs and ascensions. That's huge. Blessing, again, doing a lot of work right there. Defense, extra defense never hurts. Even on a squishy champion like this, we've managed to get 40k HP and 2.7k defense on a champion that starts off with really low defense and abysmally low HP. You know, and it's the Great Hall. Some of it is these glyphs and ascensions, and some of it is just getting good blessings and, you know, having the stats ready to go for your champions. So again, it's important to note that your top pieces here can only be flat attack, flat HP, or flat defense, both on the top pieces and on these ascensions. So honestly, as much as it sounds bad, if you're going to use or to try to get a better stat, sometimes these top pieces are actually pretty solid. Yes, you're getting a flat 80 compared to getting a 20% attack, but the fact that if I need attack on this and I have HP, I have a 50% chance of oring it into the, or dusting it, or whatever you want to call it, into the proper stat. And in the case of a support champion, I rarely care if it's defense or HP. I just don't want attack. So quite often, if it shows up as attack, it is 3 dust and I'm done, because it will not hit the stat it already is when you're rolling that stat. Gloves, meanwhile, a little more difficult. You can have flat stats or you can have a percentage stat, and you can have crit damage and you can have crit rate. Obviously for nukers, you're going to want crit rate or crit damage. Generally, crit damage is a much more efficient one because 20% extra crit damage is going to be more worthwhile than 10% crit rate. But sometimes you can only make a build work if you've got crit rate on there. And if that's what you happen to roll and you don't have a lot of dust, it could be worse. So that's not too bad. But you know, if I'm trying to re-roll this for a champion and I get 20% attack on a Georgid, I might have just kept the 20% attack. It wouldn't have been as impactful as 20% crit damage, but at least it means I can stop and save the dust for somebody else. So keep in mind what type of champion you're building for, whether or not you want to re-roll the gloves, for example. Chest pieces, they have, in addition to all of the percentage and the regular stats, they have the ability to ascend to accuracy and resistance. That means for champions that need high accuracy or high resistance, you could possibly get accuracy or resistance on the chest piece. Even for a nuker, sometimes the extra accuracy on this chest piece may be more valuable than that 20% attack, because that might let you build a much better build overall, because the base pieces fit together properly and you just didn't have quite enough accuracy. And so the extra 20-ish accuracy you get from this could be very helpful as well. Same here with boots. Boots are going to be any number stat or any percent stat or speed. And speed is the most critical one you can get on boots. Speed is generally the one you want on 99% of your boots. But again, sometimes you're going to settle for defense percent or HP percent or attack percent, as I have here. And honestly, in this case, attack percent makes some sense if I didn't need him much faster than the 240-ish speed that he is right now. I would not complain if he was just a little bit faster, but this build does work overall. Much like the top pieces, the ring has only 3 stats: attack, defense, and HP. So if you don't want attack, then it's easy to roll out of. If you do want attack, then it's still a 50-50 shot to roll into attack until you get it, and then you're done. So it doesn't hurt to roll these occasionally, and rings are useful in general, so you can pile on rings. And to be fair, with this extra attack right here and possibly having some really good percentage stats right here, and if you're trying to make a 9-piece build work, you may find yourself using an HP or a defense ring and then just ascending it to attack and hope you get a bunch of attack percentage down here. And it's not going to be quite as good, but it still will be very useful. And if it gets you in the gear set you're looking for, that 265 attack you're missing isn't going to make a big difference versus the having 9-piece merciless, for example. For amulets, they pretty much have the same stats that you have in their bases. So attack, defense, HP, and crit damage. So you've got a pretty good chance of getting extra crit damage on crit damage amulets if you want them. For the most part, the other guy's probably going to want either HP or defense. Occasionally you might want attack on an attack amulet. That's about the extent of which you're going to be looking for that. That also means that if you have to deal with a nuking amulet that is an attack amulet on an attack-based champion that has crit damage subs and still crit damage ascensions, it's a compromise, and you're losing out on some crit damage, but you're not losing out on so much crit damage that you might not notice. And if you can get yourself in the right gear, it's a way to compromise if you're struggling to get the right gear. And finally, the banners are all flat stats or resistance and accuracy. The same way that chess pieces can be, except for they don't have the percentages. They have a higher number for the attack, for the HP, and the defense. And then there's 29 max for the resistance and for the accuracy. So just keep in mind that you can get a bunch of extra stats. And again, if you have to use a banner that doesn't quite fit what you're looking for, sometimes the speed is very important because you can get speed subs on banners, and that can be absolutely huge. And speaking of speed subs, that is one thing I do want to come out here at the end. When I talk about speed kills in raid, and speed is one of the most important stats, in the end game, you are almost never keeping pieces that don't have speed on them. And the reason is, even if they don't hit speed, like this is a great banner because it gave me a ton of attack and I didn't get a lot of anything else. I would have preferred this to be speed versus defense, but you know what, it is what it is. But this fact that this has speed on it in general means I was able to glyph it. So there's 4 extra speed because this had speed in the first place. There is 4 extra speed because this had speed in the first place. There is 4 extra speed because this had speed in the first place. There is 3 extra speed because this had speed in the first place. And I could rinse and repeat for the rest of these as well. You'll notice a lot of these things didn't hit a lot of speed. They hit 0 or 1 or 2. But the fact that I was able to add 24 speed through glyphing because I had 6 spots where I could roll glyphs on is huge, and that's very important. Simply missing one of those spots to glyph is going to already cost me somewhere between 1 to 8, possibly 12 speed, simply because I can't throw a glyph on that piece of gear. So missing speed from any particular piece is huge. And the boots, well, speed boots, speed kills, but if you don't have speed boots, you really want speed on the substats Most likely, every once in a while you're building a slow champion and you don't actually need all this speed, but it is so, so rare that you're generally going to want speed on any percent stat boots because you're missing out on up to 45 speed from the base. And yes, you're going to make it up with up to, 60% extra attack or 60% something else. But if you don't have speed in the substats, then you can't glyph up that extra 1 to 12 speed to make up for the fact that you're missing a bunch of speed from here as well. And that's huge. That extra, extra 8 speed, for example, there is an extra, almost 20% of what you're missing from these boots. So speed on the substats, very, very critical for getting your champions up to super high speeds in Raid Shadow Legends. There we go. We got some glyphing done. We got some talk about how ascensions are very, very important. And I understand some of you guys are not farming Sand Devil or not farming a lot of Sand Devil. But even if you have a little bit of the Sand Devil dust, if you're doing some Cursed City, you get some of it from there. You get some of it from some tournaments occasionally as well. And sometimes you're forced to run it a couple days. It's fine. It does help to have some of those low level stats. And if you're at a lower level account, you're not going to get as much out of those extra stats because you're just not going to have them fully 6-star ascended. But you know what? 2-star ascension is something. It's better than nothing. 3-star, 4-star, again, better than nothing. They are extra stats that you might be missing out on. And furthermore, the number of times I have done takeovers with people that have struggled to hit speeds, and it turns out they just never use their speed glyphs, has been absolutely amazing as well. So I do this from experience as somebody who does takeovers. Pay attention to your glyphs. Make sure you do your faction wars. That's one of the reasons that faction wars is one of the most important sections of the game. Getting those big glyphs is huge, and you only get those 5-star and 6-star glyphs and even some 4-star glyphs from doing the later stages of faction wars. So make sure you're doing that. Get yourself your perception gear as well. Get those glyphs. And meanwhile, make sure you're doing your ascensions, make sure you're paying attention to your ascensions, and make sure you're making the most out of every piece of gear on your champion, and you'll find that you'll be able to hit amazing stats in Raid Shadow Legends. So hey, let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you think of the fact that I have Emic on my free-to-play. That is absolutely amazing as well. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I appreciate you guys hanging out. It's been a wonderful week, a lot of support. You guys, again, absolutely amazing. One of the best communities in Raid. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and until the next video, I am Bront, CatHerder.